Welcome to this primer on justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. My name is Ingrid Edstrom.
And I'm Jana ATN, and we are excited to welcome you to this brief introduction into what you, as an Accounting Alchemy Network community member, need to know before engaging in Jedi conversations and educational opportunities with the AAN. As you'll learn about more in a moment, JEDI stands for Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion.
We are so excited to have you join us on this journey as we work together to become regenerative accounting professionals, which includes building our awareness around and working to heal the inequities in our world.
Our hope is that following this presentation, each of you will have at least one or two new tools in your toolbox to be able to hold healthy space for JEDI discussions with your clients, colleagues, or other accountants that are based in well-being and care for all people.
If somehow you have stumbled upon this video as your first introduction to the Accounting Alchemy Network, we would really recommend searching instead in our video library for our playbook, as that is the best place to begin your journey with our community, learning about our values, vision, and theory of change. For those of you who are already familiar with the Accounting Alchemy Network and what we're all about, let's dive into some important information around justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion.
A quick introduction. This work has been a collaboration between myself, Jana Etienne, and Ingrid Edstrom. We have both volunteered a considerable amount of our time to create these educational materials for you, as we believe that this is some of the most important work that we could be doing in the world at this time. I'm a consultant, speaker, and trainer focused on workplace culture, inclusive leadership, and belonging, teaching within firms and at conferences, often, I'd say mostly, within the accounting industry. Ingrid is co-founder of the Accounting Alchemy Network, and she also teaches and coaches accounting professionals primarily around topics related to regenerative accounting and holistic mindset. We are grateful that you are taking the time to engage in the important topic of Jedi work, and we hope to get to know you better in an upcoming AAN conversation.
Diving into the juicy stuff, the main purpose of this presentation is to give our Accounting Alchemy community the tools you need to understand and explain to others what it is we are working towards in our AAN Jedi work, to help you get a better idea of where you personally might be in your Jedi training journey, and to offer you a clear path forward on how to engage with these often challenging topics in positive ways. I also want to acknowledge that we will be reading many of the slides in this presentation verbatim. While that's often frowned upon in presentations, it is intentional in this case to make this opportunity accessible to a wide variety of learning styles. You can listen to this presentation like a podcast if you are an auditory learner, download and read the slides if you're more visual, or follow along with both if that is most helpful to you. On this slide is a really basic rundown of what we're going to be covering in this session. I'll touch on each of these bullets so that you can know what to anticipate and follow along. And we will also try to make the sections easy to reference and clickable in the description on YouTube so that you can always easily find and revisit something when you need a refresher. First, we're going to talk a bit about what Jedi means in the context of our work together at the AAN, so that we can all be on the same page around what we're doing here and why. That will lead us into our statement of purpose for doing this work together, really grounding us into what we're hoping to create together through these efforts. Then we'll touch on the importance of somatic practice as an element of Jedi work, explaining why it is important and offering a few examples of how to start incorporating it into your routines. We will then go over the ground rules that we employ when we are doing our Jedi work together. This is very important to ensuring that we are creating intentional healing spaces where there's room for everyone to be human, be witnessed, learn and grow with compassion, which includes allowing room for mistakes. Next, we'll touch on some key definitions of common terms that we'll be exploring in our Jedi work together. And then Janal will bring us through some conversation around embracing discomfort in dialogue, setting you up with tools to help you in these practices. And finally, we will wrap up by pointing you toward the ever-evolving resource library where you can explore some self-study materials. Note that at no point in this presentation will there be a pitch of any sort. All of the Accounting Alchemy Network educational programs are offered for free or by donation to one of our nonprofit partner organizations. And we would like to keep it that way. This is a fully encapsulated educational opportunity, not a teaser with a to learn more, sign up for our thingy. That said, there are plenty of next step potential action items for you to choose from, and you'll be able to stay most informed about those by making sure that you are receiving our monthly newsletter. If you don't already get those in your email inbox, please take a moment to sign up for that by visiting our website at accountingalchemy.net.
So let's dive in. First, what do we mean when we talk about Jedi training in the AAN? Well, at the Accounting Alchemy Network, we see Jedi not just as a standalone concept, but as one of the 5 pillars of regenerative accounting. These 5 pillars guide our work and reflect the kind of future we're trying to build, one where accounting is in service of people, planet, and purpose. They include shifting the economic story away from extraction and toward regeneration, shaping more equitable systems and policies, centering well-being in how we work, and advancing Jedi values in every space we operate in and aligning business with climate and planetary health. Jedi is also what we call a permission to play value. In other words, it's not optional, it's foundational. If you're here, it means you're committed to doing this work with care, openness, and a willingness to grow. Jedi isn't a side topic. It's central to the culture we're building at the Accounting Alchemy Network and how we show up as a member of this network. If you'd like a refresher on the 5 pillars, our values, or our theory of change, we'd encourage you to take a look at the playbook, and of course, feel free to reach out with any questions. You'll find a link to the playbook on the resources page of the website.
For the purposes of this presentation, we're going to zoom in just on the Jedi pillar. What do we mean when we talk about Jedi in the Accounting Alchemy Network? Well, in the AAN, JEDI is an acronym that stands for Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. Engaging in Jedi training and discussions invites all of us to challenge our ignorance and complicity in a system intentionally designed to maintain a caste that oppresses certain groups of people, particularly people of color, minorities, and those living with disadvantages. By building our awareness of these oppressive systems, practicing talking about these ideas, and creating opportunities to heal and develop new supportive systems for all, together, our efforts can create significant positive change in our world, particularly in the networks closest to us, including our workplaces and the accounting profession as a whole. Our goal is to walk through this Jedi work as a community to create a safer space where we can explore what justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion mean in our society and discover the role each of us plays in the systems, constructs, and structures of oppression.
So let's break down each of these terms. Justice, the pursuit of fairness and equity by raising awareness of systems, practices, and policies, history, and constructs that perpetuate harm or inequities, and taking actionable steps to repair and transform them, fostering a society where all individuals and communities can thrive. Equity, creating fair opportunities and outcomes for all by understanding and addressing the advantages and disadvantages stemming from difference, with a focus on uplifting those historically pushed to the margins, striving for a society where every individual has what they need to succeed and thrive. Diversity, acknowledging, witnessing, and honoring differences, both visible and invisible, and understanding how those differences shape our identities, experiences, perspectives, and relationships with one another. Inclusion, Intentionally welcoming diversity and affirming the experiences of everyone through consistent action that creates safe and supportive spaces, allowing all to fully express themselves openly, vulnerably, and confidently.
By building our awareness around these important topics and practicing and discussing them, we hope to create opportunities to shift our paradigms and behaviors, creating a healthier world that includes harm reduction, reparative practices, and cultural humility. When we behave inclusively, the outcome is belonging.
So that leads us into our statement of purpose. Our intention is to open up and normalize discussions around justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion in our culture, to confront our complicity, cultivate compassion, and heal the divide that oppressive systems and constructs have imposed upon each of us. Before we go further, we want to pause and reflect on why this work matters, why JEDI is not only relevant but essential in our profession. We're a community of accountants, finance professionals, advisors, and change makers. So why are we talking about justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion? What does this have to do with us? The truth is, accounting doesn't happen in a vacuum. It shapes and is shaped by the systems we live in. Whether we are aware of it or not, our work affects how resources are distributed, who gets access to opportunity, and what kind of world we are helping to build. So what we are offering is an invitation to reflect, to consider how our roles as professionals, as members of firms and organizations, and as part of the AAN community can drive change. How does this impact the accounting industry? To ask ourselves, what kind of profession do we want to be a part of? And what kind of impact can we make when we take this work seriously together? This is about more than theory. It's about shifting culture, expanding what's possible, and living into the values we say we hold. Rather than listing off a bunch of statistics about our world and profession, I would love for you to take this opportunity to pause this video and journal, maybe have a moment of reflection, or invite a discussion if you're watching this with someone around one or more of the following prompt questions. Where have you noticed unequal treatment or heard others expressing displeasure around unequal treatment in your workplace or profession? Reflect on a time when you may have struggled to feel belonging in a workplace or noticed someone else experiencing or expressing difficulty. What are some of the advantages or disadvantages that have worked in your favor or that you've had to overcome in your career path? What communication, behaviors, or emotions do you notice in yourself and those around you when topics around race, sexuality, gender, religion, or proactive measures around diversity, equity, and inclusion come up in your workplace or in industry events? So we'd like to invite you to pause the recording now to journal or reflect.
Welcome back from your reflection exercise. We are now going to move into our section about the importance of somatic practice in our JEDI work. In case you're not already familiar with this idea, the root of the word somatic is soma, which means body. A somatic practice is an opportunity to check in with our bodies and emotions to help us to maintain our overall wellness. We are going to be talking about some challenging topics, many of which can be emotionally triggering, and it's normal for us to experience some stress when we do this work. It is important that we not hold on to that stress and instead allow ourselves the time and space to process and release what we are feeling through healthy movement, breathing, and mindfulness. You may or may not have noticed some emotions come up just a moment ago in your journaling or reflecting opportunity, as sometimes even remembering or imagining a scenario can bring up difficult feelings. This is totally normal. And when we are discussing these challenging topics in the Accounting Alchemy Network, we want to create space where each of us is allowed to be human. which includes creating discussion spaces where all of our complex questions and emotions are allowed. In order to learn, we need to be allowed to be confused, frustrated, hurt, and even angry sometimes. And we want to learn to gently witness each other in our humanness without judgment. We also want to learn to better support ourselves and each other in regulating our emotions, building resilience. For one of my favorite reference materials around the use of somatic practice and Jedi work, I highly recommend reading Resmaa Menakem's wonderful book, My Grandmother's Hands. He delves into some big Jedi ideas and offers a somatic practice at the end of each chapter. Similarly, when we're doing Jedi work in the AAN, we will begin each discussion with a bit of a grounding practice that will help us to align the group into a shared intentional space, and the discussion facilitators might also encourage the group to regularly slow down, do brief breathing exercises, or even move our bodies periodically in the discussion when things get heavy. This helps each of us to move the energy through, often releasing stress that's been stored in our bodies for years, leading to overall better health in addition to more effective conversations around difficult topics. Think of it like getting a deep tissue massage for your nervous system. For right now, let's just do a very brief example. Please take a moment to close your eyes or lower your gaze, whatever feels most comfortable for you in this moment, and allow yourself to take a deep breath in through your nose, holding it briefly at the top, and releasing it with a long, slow sigh. And on your next breath, really see if you can breathe into any area of the body that needs a bit of extra love or attention, maybe your shoulders or jaw. And on the exhale, release any stress or tension you may have been holding, maybe even moving that area of the body and letting anything that is no longer serving you fall away, all the way down your body through the floor below you. Good. Now let's take one more deep breath in through the nose, just feeling gratitude for the air we get to breathe and for the spark of life that is the fire within us, for the waters in and all around us, and for this beautiful earth that feeds us and where we get to live. And now let's continue to just breathe deeply at whatever cadence feels most comfortable and relaxing for you. Allowing yourself to be fully present in your body, in this place and time, releasing any thoughts of what came before this moment and what might be coming later. Allow yourself to just be here now, recognizing that you are safe and that there is nothing you need to do in this moment but simply be. If you would like to stay in this somatic exercise longer, take a moment to pause the video now and know that you can take as long as you want or need to breathe, rest, and take care of yourself. Then, when you are ready, take one more deep breath and move your body in whatever way feels good to you in this moment. And come back to the video. Well done. For anyone who might like some more education around grounding practices and setting intentional space for a meeting, the Accounting Alchemy Network has a webinar replay on this topic available on YouTube, which includes information on how leading groundings at the beginning of each meeting can really benefit us, especially with our accounting clients. The link to that free resource is at the top of this slide, or you can just head to our YouTube channel and search for the word grounding.
Now that we are all a bit more grounded and fully present, let's shift into talking about the core group agreements we found essential for meaningful Jedi conversations. We intentionally call these agreements rather than rules because this is about shared responsibility. These aren't mandates. These are choices we make together to co-create the kind of space we want to be in. It also turns conversations like these into consent conversations. Calling them agreements invites a spirit of collaboration. It gives each of us the opportunity to consciously opt in and engage with intention. Because real engagement begins when we choose to participate in a space where trust, respect, and accountability are mutually held.
To foster a safe space for us to achieve what we've just discussed, it's important to have a communication framework and mutually agreed to guidelines for our meetings. We do have a communication framework document for the Accounting Alchemy Network, which goes over the important cultural aspects in our network and how we treat each other and conduct ourselves in AAN shared spaces. You can access the communication framework in the resources section of the Accounting Alchemy website at accountingalchemy.net. The JEDI Agreements go just a little further, helping to ensure a space where our members can feel effectively held in this brave and vulnerable work that we are embarking on together.
Together, we are agreeing to the best of our ability in any moment to 1, active listening. Listen with compassion and respect for others' experience, practicing non-judgment. 2, speak briefly and stay on the agreed upon topic. 3, step up and step back. This means speak up if you tend to be quiet or let others speak if you tend to speak a lot. 4, speak to the group as a whole and let's try to stay away from individual crosstalk. 5, try to speak in the first person from your personal experience rather than making sweeping statements about people, including what other people should or should not do.
6, choose to participate. Everyone has the opportunity to pass. 7, respect confidentiality. What happens here stays here. You can share the learnings with others, but please not the names. And 8, oops and ouch. We understand that we will all make mistakes, and if this happens, we agree to acknowledge them. Sometimes a speaker in a group might catch themselves mid-sentence making a racially charged comment or gaffe. And if that does happen, they might want to acknowledge it by saying, oops. The group can then discuss if desired. Also, occasionally a listener might be offended by what a speaker says because it shows up as inappropriate, obtuse, or offensive to them. The listener can say ouch to make note of their discomfort to the speaker and the group. The group can discuss if desired. Remember, the point is not to not make mistakes. The point is to be brave enough to engage in these conversations where we know that we have a lot to learn. And be patient with ourselves and each other.
So what are we talking about? Let's touch on some key definitions and terms so that we can help ensure that when we're throwing around some of these words, many of which have become charged or triggering for many, then we can help ensure that we are in agreement around what it is we're referring to. Let's begin with the basics. We already mentioned that JEDI, in terms of the Accounting Alchemy Network, stands for justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And we've talked about what each of those means. If you'd like a refresher on any of those terms, they are listed here again on this slide, and you're welcome to revisit them when we read them earlier in the video. One element we want to emphasize once more is that when we have a community or people that consistently behaves inclusively, we cultivate feelings of belonging for everyone in that community. That is a big part of what we strive for in the Accounting Alchemy Network.
Before we hop to the next terms, I want to bring your attention to the idea of bias. We offer a formal definition of internal bias on this slide as ideas, beliefs, or preferences often learned and held unconsciously through societal and cultural programming that influence thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. In addition to that formal definition, I also want to add that my dear friend and Jedi mentor, Fatima Mann, from whom I've gotten to learn so much about these topics, offers a fun alternative definition that I think makes it a bit easier to understand. Fatima says that bias is when someone else's ideas are taking up space in our heads. These biases are automatic and frequently go unnoticed by the person experiencing them unless someone else points them out, and often contradict one's conscious beliefs about fairness and equality. If we think about how we learn things, especially as children, we're often told at a young age that certain things are true or fact by people that we've been taught to trust or see as authority figures. Our parents, teachers, adults on TV. Now that we're adults, we might be a bit more discerning about which sources of information we trust and which we don't. But when we were kids, we didn't really have that opportunity. We were taught to believe certain things. And because we had been taught to trust that source, those ideas were taken for granted to just be how things are. For many of us, the opportunities to reevaluate these ideas and beliefs don't come along very often. And so when we're given the opportunity to do the work of questioning things that we've taken for granted since before we can remember, some big feelings of discomfort can arise. Often, that discomfort is described as cognitive dissonance, when the ideas that we are presented with do not align harmoniously with the ideas that are firmly rooted in our consciousness. Also, it's good to note that bias can go both directions, both making us uncomfortable when something doesn't align and also making us feel more comfortable when we find confirmation bias or disconfirmation bias, which is when we are presented with ideas that uphold our existing ideas or refute ideas that don't align with us. A strategy you can use when encountering this is to simply ask your mind the question, what if what I'm telling myself isn't true? And try to not throw the baby out with the bathwater, dismissing everything that we're presenting here when you find that you disagree with parts of it. Malidoma Somé is quoted as having said, "Conflict is the spirit of a relationship asking itself to deepen." We invite you to lean into this conversation with us, and it is okay if you don't agree with all of it.
Now we're going to go through a handful of terms fairly quickly. Definitions give us a shared language. They ground the conversation and give clarity to what we're talking about, which is particularly important when we're working with something as complex, layered, and nuanced and deeply personal as justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Different dictionaries define many of these terms in different ways. We wanted to be very intentional in the words we used in our definitions. We recognize that some of the terms and words in these definitions might create discomfort or trigger strong feelings. If that should happen, we want to encourage you to pause and take a deep breath anytime you need to, especially if you're feeling challenged. We've said this earlier, but it bears repeating. This is big work that we're doing together here. For each term, we invite you to reflect on your own experiences with the language and terminology and the many ways you may have experienced or witnessed these definitions in your everyday life. We want to encourage you to take this at your own pace. Maybe pause the video with each term and really think about what the term means to you and how you feel about the definition that we're proposing for use here in the Accounting Alchemy Network. You may even want to take out a journal to record some of your thoughts or feelings. We encourage you to bring up questions or discussions around these ideas in our JEDI conversations as you move forward.
The first term is construct, a concept or idea created and accepted to categorize and organize social reality. While it is natural for us to observe elements themselves and differences between them, examples age, gender, race, the ways they are categorized or assigned value, often perpetuating hierarchies or notions of supremacy, are shaped by cultural, social, or political dynamics over time.
Race, a social construct used to categorize people based on perceived physical differences such as skin color, hair texture, and facial features, resulting in social or political systems that perpetuate inequality, discrimination, and power imbalances between different groups.
BIPOC is an acronym that stands for Black, Indigenous, and People of Color. It is a term that is generally used to refer to people in these groups, particularly in relation to the impacts of systemic racism and oppression.
Identity, a person's sense of self, which includes many dimensions. For example, race, ethnicity, disability, sexual orientation, socioeconomics, religion, personal experiences, values, etc., which can be self-chosen or externally ascribed. In addition, identity refers to how people perceive, describe, and refer to each other.
Intersectionality, a framework for understanding how different elements of our identities intersect, shaping experiences that are both shared and uniquely different for each of us. This includes how various forms of discrimination overlap and intersect, creating unique and often compounded experiences of oppression. Intersectionality highlights the complexity of identity and the multiple factors that contribute to social inequality.
Racism, a system of power and privilege that perpetuates discrimination and prejudice against individuals and groups of people based on their race, that operates at the individual, institutional, and societal levels, shaping societal structures, enabling systemic barriers, and perpetuating inequality. This is often rooted in the belief that some races are inherently and, in some interpretations, divinely superior to others.
Colorism, discrimination or prejudice based on the relative lightness or darkness of a person's skin, often resulting in preferential treatment for those with lighter skin. Rooted in the history of colonialism and slavery, colorism also manifests within communities as internalized oppression, perpetuating harmful hierarchies and biases.
Systemic racism, the institutional policies, practices, and systems, and cultural norms designed to uphold the advantages and powers of certain racial groups, while others experience discrimination, inequality, and disadvantage. These dynamics are embedded in the structures of society, influencing critical areas such as education, healthcare, employment, and the justice system.
Oppression, the systemic and pervasive exercise of power by a dominant group over marginalized groups, which manifests in social, economic, and political structures that disadvantage certain groups while privileging others, often leading to sustained discrimination, bias, inequities, and inequalities in systems, institutions, policies, and practices.
Anti-racism, an active process of identifying, actively opposing, and working to eliminate racism by challenging racist behaviors and beliefs. This includes changing systems, organizational structures, policies, and practices so that power is redistributed and shared equitably. It involves dismantling racism in all of its forms, personal, institutional, and structural.
Pro-justice, a stance or approach to taking intentional action to support and promote fairness, equity, and the protection of fundamental human rights for all people. In the Accounting Alchemy Network, we use this term instead of anti-racism to embrace what we are working toward rather than working against.
Anti-Blackness, a specific form of racism against people of African descent that manifests in attitudes, behaviors, and policies involving historically based or institutionally perpetuated systems of exploitation, dehumanization, and systemic oppression of Black people. These systems were created to maintain and defend wealth, power, and privilege for white people, reinforcing the construct of Blackness as a racial category.
Marginalization, the process through which individuals or groups are pushed to the edge of society, limiting their access to resources, rights, and opportunities, often due to systemic discrimination based on factors such as race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, abilities, age, or immigration status.
Tokenism, a symbolic effort made to include members of marginalized groups in a way that is superficial and does not genuinely address inequities or issues of inequality. This often involves engaging, appointing, or including a small number of individuals from underrepresented groups to give the appearance of inclusion without making substantive changes.
Microaggressions, subtle remarks or behavior, verbal or nonverbal, that intentionally or unintentionally communicate insensitive, negative, or hostile messages. These can include bias or prejudice toward a person or a group, particularly members of marginalized communities.
Gaslighting, a form of psychological manipulation in which a person or group causes another person or group to question or doubt their reality, perceptions, or experiences. This can involve dismissing or undermining lived experience of discrimination, exclusion, or oppression.
Privilege, an unearned advantage or benefit based on characteristics such as race, gender, socioeconomic status, or other dimensions of identity that often goes unnoticed by those who possess it, but significantly impacts opportunities, experiences, and attitudes toward others.
White privilege, the unquestioned and unearned set of advantages, entitlements, benefits, and choices bestowed upon people solely because they are white, including greater access to resources, opportunities, and protection from racial discrimination, often at the expense of people of color.
White fragility, the discomfort and defensiveness on the part of a white person when confronted with information or discussions about race, racism, racial inequality, and injustice, or their own racial privilege.
White solidarity, the unspoken agreement among white people to protect the social advantages of whiteness, to not only avoid discomfort, but to also actively prevent discussions about racism, race, white privilege, and systemic inequalities. This dynamic has a silencing effect on efforts to call out, challenge, or correct racially problematic speech or behavior.
White supremacy, the belief or ideology in the natural or innate superiority of white people, granting them the perceived right to lead, control, and define people of color. This ideology is reinforced through ideas, thoughts, beliefs, and actions that manifest in social structures, systems, and behaviors designed to uphold and perpetuate white dominance.
Decolonization, the process of undoing the legacy of colonialism by reclaiming culture, political and economic independence, values, and perspectives. It begins with transforming our thinking, then challenging the narratives and systems that perpetuate colonial impacts, while addressing and dismantling ongoing injustices affecting marginalized communities.
Allyship, the active, consistent, and intentional practice of using one's privilege to support and advocate for marginalized communities. This includes understanding and addressing challenges faced by those groups, amplifying their voices, and working to drive systemic change. True allyship also involves reflecting on and addressing biases within one's own groups and spheres of influence, fostering transformation from within to create a more equitable and inclusive society.
Performative allyship, professing to support marginalized groups in ways that are more superficial than helpful, or might actively harm those groups. This often involves token gestures that offer the appearance of solidarity and provide the ally, quote unquote, with some kind of reward or acknowledgement for being a, quote, good person, unquote.
Cancel culture, a socially driven phenomenon where individuals, organizations, or groups face public rejection, ostracization, or professional consequences due to perceived offensive, controversial, or morally objectionable opinions or actions. Often fueled by social media, it can serve as a form of accountability, but also devolve into a toxic or disproportionate response, leading to harm, fear of open discourse, and the suppression of nuanced conversations.
Social justice, the pursuit of a society where all individuals have equal rights, opportunities, and access to resources. This involves understanding and addressing the root causes of inequality, discrimination, and inequity, and working toward systemic change to ensure fairness for all, particularly marginalized groups.
Activism, a continuum of actions from small everyday efforts to broader initiatives aimed at empowering individuals and communities to create positive change. It involves challenging systemic barriers and promoting fairness, equity, and inclusion, while envisioning and building a more compassionate and equitable world. And the last term we want to touch on is the term created by the Accounting Alchemy Network to describe the identity that we are working to co-create: regenerative accountant. A regenerative accountant is someone who carries the commitment to prioritize people and planet over profit. They actively exhibit and continue to cultivate a set of attitudes, behaviors, knowledges, and skills so that they can have a positive impact on the world. You can learn more about becoming a regenerative accountant by watching our playbook on our YouTube channel. Now that we've gone through these definitions, Jana is going to introduce a few brief ideas to support you in working through any feelings of discomfort that may be arising around stepping into these conversations.
As we've acknowledged throughout this program, this is hard work, and these conversations can be uncomfortable. Sometimes the discomfort is so strong, it makes us want to shut down, step back, or disengage entirely. That's a normal human response. But growth often begins at the edge of our comfort zone. It's in these moments when we feel stretched or uneasy that we have a chance to challenge our assumptions, confront old stories, and deepen our understanding. That discomfort can actually create space for more authentic connection if we're willing to stay with it. So, how do we do that? How do we stay present when we feel defensive, overwhelmed, or emotionally activated? There are three practices that can support us in staying grounded during these conversations. The first is to notice what's happening in this moment. This means pausing, noticing what's happening to us, what's happening within us as it's happening. When we pause and pay attention, we begin to notice what is happening in real time. We create space to recognize what's going on inside. What are we thinking about in this moment? What are we feeling? How are those thoughts and feelings affecting what we're experiencing physically? Without this awareness, we may respond impulsively or lose sight of our intentions. This practice is especially important when we're feeling emotionally activated. Jedi conversations can bring up discomfort, tension, or even pain. That's not a sign that something is wrong. It's a signal that something matters. Rather than push those feelings away, we can notice them with curiosity. This is the first step in staying present, even when we want to disconnect. Here are a few questions that might help you tune into what's going on. What am I thinking about in this moment? Am I tuned in or checked out? What is my body telling me? How are my emotions impacting me physically? How is my internal state affecting my behavior? Once we've noticed what's happening in real time, especially if we're feeling reactive or triggered, the next step is to stay rooted in our intention, despite that reactivity or that trigger. This means drawing on strategies to stay emotionally grounded and connected to our values. When we stay aligned with our intentions, we create space for safety, authenticity, and meaningful dialogue. This is especially important in Jedi work. These conversations can surface deep emotions such as defensiveness, shame, fear, or even guilt. But our commitment to justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion isn't just about ideas. It's about how we show up in the room, how we hold space, and how we can be or stay connected to the kind of change we want to be a part of. Staying rooted in our intention helps us remember that this work is relational. It's not about being perfect, it's about being present, open, and accountable. When we can stay grounded in our values, we're more likely to create those conditions for trust, vulnerability, and growth. Here are a few practices that might help you connect with your intention. Visualize the outcome that you would like to see from this conversation. Practice empathy by seeing the situation through another person's eyes. Ground yourself with techniques to stay anchored and centered. And then, when the conversation has passed, when the moment is over, the next step is to restore balance and calm. Difficult conversations often leave an emotional residue. Taking time to reflect and process what happened helps release tension, integrate what we've learned, and then restore a sense of calm. This step is just as essential as the other two. Emotional and psychological recovery is a critical step that many overlook, especially in Jedi work, where emotions can run deep, even when the dialogue is constructive. Without recovery, we risk carrying emotional weight into our next conversation, our next decision, our next moment. Restoration allows us to quietly reflect on what we've learned, recenter ourselves, and then return to the work with clarity and compassion. It's not about rushing past discomfort. It's about honoring the emotional labor of this work and building the emotional resilience we need to keep showing up. Here are a few prompts that might help you regain a sense of balance and calm. Reflect on the conversation to solidify insights and foster understanding. Release lingering tension through mindfulness, movement, or journaling, or the somatic practice that we talked about earlier. Restore balance to support emotional well-being and encourage growth. So these three practices, noticing, staying rooted, restoring, they give us a way to move through discomfort with intention rather than avoidance. They don't take away the hard parts of Jedi work. They help us move through the discomfort with clarity, presence, and grace. And that presence is what makes change possible within ourselves, our relationships, and the systems we're here to challenge and reimagine.
With that, we have reached the conclusion of this primer resource on justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion for the Accounting Alchemy Network. We hope that you have found this tool helpful and look forward to having your voice in the room for any upcoming Jedi conversations. Please feel free to share this video with others, even outside of the Accounting Alchemy Network community. We created this resource to be an open source and of the Creative Commons. So, if you know of an organization that might benefit from creating something similar to this, please encourage them to reach out to us. We would be happy to share it with them. And thank you so much again for stepping into this important work with us. For more resources from the Accounting Alchemy Network, please visit the resources page of our website, which also contains a link to our ever-expanding Jedi Resources Library spreadsheet. All of the resources we mentioned can be found in that spreadsheet. Thank you again for joining us.